Hello, and welcome to the Created to Create show. I'm Michelle Dennis Evans, and joining me here today, I have the beautiful Anne Hamilton, who has written more than 40 books, ranging from children's picture books to multi award winning YA fantasy and prize winning nonfiction. So, you once taught mathematics in school,
That's right.
and tell me about your ancient technique.
My ancient technique is called numerical literary style, or some writers call it biblical style. But it's just something I'll love to throw in there because I can.
Beautiful. And you've developed your own devotional theology, a new genre.
Yes.
Yes.
Yep. Yep.
And tell me, most of your books are in the category addressing the reasons for?
Constriction and wasting in people's lives as they try and cross over the spiritual threshold into their calling. And that's something that I stumbled into by mistake. Not really mistake because God sort of leads you that way. But my plan was to write children's books, and God's plan was obviously to do something slightly different. So that's me.
Your
Yeah.
books are very deep and very detailed.
Yeah, because the background of science, you have to sort of feel that you've made your case sufficiently that even though, you cannot prove something beyond a shadow of a doubt, you've made a really substantial case. So that's why I throw everything I can into it. And then, of course, as soon as the book is published, I go, wait, there's another dozen things I could have put in there. Oh, no, too late.
And then you start the next one.
Then I start the next one.
So, can you think back to when your love of storytelling first was sparked?
I think my love of storytelling first was sparked when I wrote a Marine Boy comic and illustrated myself, of course, back in the days when, this is showing my age, right? You had the precursor of manga, you had the Japanese cartoons on TV, and Marine Boy was my hero. And there were all sorts of things like mermaids and seahorses and starfish and all sorts of dolphins and whatever. And so I don't know what I wrote in that story, but that was my very first story.
Sounds amazing. Do you still have it?
Somewhere along my many shifts over the years, it disappeared. So just
Oh,
don't know where it is.
that's a shame. And how has your personal journey or faith influenced the stories you write?
It really seriously influences the stories I write because I sit down with my story when I finish the first draft and I say to myself, what have I missed here? And I talk to the Lord about it. And sometimes He does not answer me for decades, which is really frustrating. But then when you get the answer, you go, that is what I was missing all the time. I might send out a story to different readers. I might get different appraisers to work on it, tell me what's wrong. And they will say to me, hey, great story. And in your heart, there is something not quite right about it. It doesn't sit in that right way. There's something not quite gelling with it. And so I just wait until it all comes together. And unfortunately, in fiction, that can take decades, as I said. Yeah. Yeah. But in nonfiction, it's usually sort of the actual writing out of your own life experience where you suddenly get the insight as a result of writing it all out.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So, do you have an average time of how long it takes you to write a book?
Anywhere between 6 weeks and 27 years.
Which one was 27 years?
27 years was Many Colored Realm. So,
Uh-huh.
yeah, which I'm going to actually do a reissue of not too in the not too
Ah.
distant future because after I finished it and everything was ready to go, I got a really famous editor to tell. And the interesting thing about it was this editor told me that I needed to change the epilogue because there was a standard way of writing that I didn't know about, right? Now, before the editor got to it, right, I'd test driven it with 50 kids And every one of them had said, "Oh, I love that epilogue," right? And no one said that afterwards. And I went, we did the right grammatical and all the rest of it thing, but it didn't work story wise.
Um,
Yeah, so sometimes you've just got to break the rules.
yes.
Yeah,
At the right time.
at the right time.
Knowing the right time is always hard, isn't it?
Exactly, exactly. And I think it's the same for storytelling as it is for artwork. You know, you look at the great artists, right? And a lot of people will say about them, they know the rules so well that they know when to break them. They've broken a rule here, but you've got to know the rules before you
Learn
can
it
break them
first.
successfully. Yeah, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Have
Mm.
you studied writing?
Not academically, but I've done hundreds maybe of courses, right? So, that
Mm.
kind of thing. After a while, you do hundreds of courses and you join in hundreds of meetings with different writers. And so you get a real feel for it after a while. Yeah.
Yeah, I've learnt so much from other writers, just even in conversation. It's
Mhm.
incredible. Would you recommend somebody just starting out does enroll in a course or?
Or either enroll in a course or join a writing group, even if it's just your local writers group at your library, your local library, absolutely, because you don't know what you don't know.
Mhm.
And that is particularly true when you come to approaching a publisher, right? So many people will just approach a first publisher on the web and you just go, it's a scam artist, right? There's so many people out there that are looking for your money, and you just go, no, a little bit of research, a little bit of talking with people in a group would have told you that no, this is, would have put up all the red flags.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm,
Yeah, great advice.
mm.
What does your writing routine look like?
What does my writing routine like? Well, I'm completely out of my writing routine at the moment. So, my usual writing routine is to do an hour a day, right? Regardless of whether I feel like it or not. The only exceptions to that is I don't work on the weekends and I do at least an hour so that I'm in that space where I know what the story looks like. And otherwise, I'm constantly having to go over the same things because I don't know what my last thought was.
Yeah.
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 Mm.
Yeah, I find it. For
Yeah.
me, it works way better if I'm just doing dabbling every day.
Yeah. I'm
One
not
day.
one of those people who plans out everything to start with. Some people do that. They're plotters, and some people are pantsers. They just go with the flow. But I actually sort of I've got a climax in mind, I've got an end in mind, and I work my way up to the climax and I work my way down to the end. And hopefully I don't get lost in that process. And hopefully I don't lose either the climax or the ending.
It sounds a little bit the way I write too.
Yeah,
Know where
yeah,
I'm heading, hope I get there.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Mm.
What else would you like to tell us? Would you like to tell us about how your faith influences the way you approach your storytelling or characters or your nonfiction? Which one would you like to talk about?
I think, it doesn't matter whether it's fiction or non-fiction. I'm always actually in a conversation with God about what's in the story, right? So I remember when I was writing one of my early YA fantasies, Melon's Wood, and suddenly the heroine was saying things that I went, no, 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 you're not supposed to say that, right? And, you know, um, she was accused of never forgiving anyone, right?
Mm.
And finally I went, this is right, but I don't know why, right? And I had this conversation with God and I said, why is it that she's not forgiving anyone, right? And God was saying, that's your problem. You never forgive anyone.
Oh,
You
wow.
excuse them, right? And I had to sort of really grapple with the difference between forgiving and excusing. And finally, I realized forgiving actually implies a judgment of people. You're basically saying You did me wrong, but I'm releasing you. And excusing means, oh, it doesn't matter. I don't matter, right?
Mhm.
And what happens hasn't mattered, right? I'm allowing you to just get away with it rather than releasing a judgment to God. And so there's all sorts of things that happen like that within my writing where I'm not planning anything and suddenly, a good story will be taken away from you because the characters will come so much to life that you go, oh, that wasn't in the plan, but I can't change that. Yeah,
I
yeah.
think everyone just needs to rewind and listen to your little snippet on forgiveness. That was a beautiful life lesson.
Thank
Well said.
you.
That
Thank
was
you.
beautiful. Absolutely.
Mhm. Yeah.
Would you say that writing is a form of ministry for you?
Oh, totally, totally.
Are you not in it for the big bucks?
Oh, big bucks. Yeah, yeah. Well, it took me actually, here's a bit of real life information. It took me 5 years of my business before I earned $1.67 total in 5 years. So if you're doing it for the money, don't even think about it, right? It's got to be for the ministry. Your heart's got to be in it. You've got to want to do it for God reasons, not because you think that the big bucks are going to come rolling in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
not a lot of money in it.
There's not a lot of money in it, and you have to constantly explain that to people that there's not a lot of money in it because they've only heard the mega huge success stories. They haven't heard, all of that. In fact, only just a couple of months ago, I was reading that the big five publishers in the world, right? These are the biggest ones in the world. They have huge conglomerates, right? And what they admitted was that 19%, right? That's nearly 1 in 5 of all books that they publish fail to sell more than a dozen copies. I know. It was so awesome because I rang up everyone I know and went, hey, congratulations, you've sold more than a dozen copies. I know that you're thinking of yourself as a failure because you've only sold about 100, but boy, you've done better than at least 1 in 5 of those people and maybe more of them.
Wow, that's incredible numbers.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
is phenomenal numbers. And so you can see, that's a huge loss for a company,
Mm,
right? And that means that, fundamentally 1 in 5 of every books they produce is a huge loss.
mm,
And that's pretty standard across the board,
hmm.
you know, even
Yeah.
for my own books.
Yeah, wow.
Mm.
So what are you working on right now?
I'm not working on anything really right now.
Focus elsewhere at the moment?
Focus elsewhere at the moment. It's sort of one of those things where I guess that, one of the second book that I wrote, the second devotional theology book that I wrote was called God's Panoply, which is about the armor of God, right? And I've gone a huge, huge circle to come back to that
Mm.
and go, oh, I need to add another chapter. And so I'm just thinking through all of the issues to do with adding another chapter to a book that's about 15 years old now.
You wouldn't write another book?
No, 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 because this is missing from that book.
Do you
So
miss it? Do you miss writing when you're not focused on a project?
if I wait too long before I write again, I'll become a very nasty person. So, you can tell when I haven't written for a long while because I'm grouchy and grumbly and I'm obviously not doing what I should be doing. So, yeah.
Wow.
Mm,
Wow.
mm. Yeah, I remember reading in one of Madeleine L'Engle's books about some author, a fictional author who was grumbly and grouchy when she didn't write for a long time. And I thought, yep, I know exactly where you're coming from. Yeah. Mm,
Mm.
mm.
Yeah. Feels for me, it feels like something's missing. I'm
Yes.
just
Mm.
I'm just not balanced. It's like
Yeah,
trying to
exactly.
walk with a flat tire.
Exactly. That's right. And I think that that tells you whether you're a writer or not, whether you got the fire in the belly to keep on going, even though there's only $1.67 every 5 years.
There's a bit more than that.
Oh, there's a
Right.
bit more now. Yes.
All righty. I have loved chatting with you today. What's something we can leave aspiring authors or just getting started writers?
Just keep writing. Just absolutely keep on writing. If the Lord has given you a story, then keep writing it regardless. Do not listen to everybody else. I remember that one day I sent out a story for appraisal from big name appraiser, right? And she came back with all of these bad things, right? And I would have given up at that point, except that very same day, my sister rang me up and told me all of the things she loved about the story. And they almost perfectly matched to everything that this appraiser had disliked. And I went, you just got to know your audience. You just got to find it. And that's what you need to pray for, that God will bring the right people to you who are your audience and who are your target and who He's meant that story for. Yeah. So,
Great advice. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining me today. And I will drop your links in the notes. And if
yep.
anyone who's still watching could hit that like button, subscribe, pop over to the links and follow Annie on Facebook. Your website is, what's your
Yes.
website?
My website is Grace Drops with Anne, that's Anne with an E, of course, .com.
Okay, I'll put that down in the show notes as well. Thank you,
Okay.
Annie.
Bless you. Okay.